everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over some tips for dog trainers who are working on cases that involve barrier aggression or barrier frustration. So if you're just a regular dog owner or dog enthusiast, I suggest going to a professional trainer that doesn't use any forms of physical or psychological intimidation to help you with this training. The reason being is the tips that I'm going to give, if you can't read your dog's body language very well, you can actually be making the problem worse rather than better. So sensitizing the dog rather than desensitizing the dog or counter conditioning. So it's really important to be able to read the dog's body language in order to raise criteria or lower criteria as you're training, as well as it's great to find a trainer that can break the steps up small enough that the dog isn't having undue stress during the training. Are you cold? So the first tip is especially important for little dogs like Epic here, who's a little bit cold because it's like 69 degrees Fahrenheit instead of like 75, how she would like it. So I better get her a sweater. She does have a heated bed. Okay, that's off topic. But say, for example, you have a little dog with barrier frustration or barrier aggression, and it has to do with when you're holding the little dog. Now you're out for a walk, and suddenly this loose dog comes charging over with an intention to hurt your dog. And so a lot of people have been told to not pick their little dogs up, but sometimes you have to because of a potential threat of injury or death. Also, if you're walking in a busy street, and you have a very small dog like this, people are not going to see your dog if there's a crowd, and so you have to pick your dog up. And if they have some sort of barrier frustration or aggression with being held and people approaching, they're going to have an extremely stressful time. And some dogs might potentially bite if someone comes into range of their mouth, or they could redirect on your arm. So working on the restraint exercise, which I'm going to link below, which it says it's for puppies, but you need to get a professional trainer to help you if it's an adult dog, because as I said, you could sensitize the dog and make the issue worse rather than make it better. So you're going in small approximations. So you're conditioning being restrained to create a different emotional response in the dog and to create an understanding of what they are to do. So it takes a lot of training. If you think about someone in a gym that's working out, if they did just a couple of exercises, like a couple of push-ups, and then they think they're done, that's not how learning or building fitness works. You have to do it with repetition to create a strong, conditioned emotional response and behavior. So I typically will tell clients, you're not going to get any of that unless you've already done 10 to 12 lessons that are a couple minutes long on these exercises. So basically restraining the dog when there's nothing around, then restraining your dog when they're in a safe environment and it's something they want that's not that exciting, like food. So positive things that they want: food, toys, something they want to sniff, then out and about. Then say they want to see their favorite person. So if the dog guards a person, then they would not be the one that's restraining the dog. They would be the one approaching. And then also working on picking the dog up. So I'll link a video on picking your dog up as well. But you're going in slow approximations so the dog's getting used to being picked up. Also for little dogs, you can teach them that when you bend over to jump into your arms, and so it becomes a behavior they do that you can cue. And for my little Chihuahua Kiko, that extremely helped with her barrier, I would call it aggression, when being picked up. So I actually had that problem with her. If she was in a car and someone stuck their head in the window, or if I was holding her and someone approached, or a dog approached, she would become extremely aggressive. This is a Chihuahua that had distemper, so she had no teeth. So it's really sad, but you know, it was undue stress for her. So teaching them to be restrained. And the wonderful thing about if you have a dog that's reactive and also with barrier frustration or aggression, once you worked on it, you can actually use management and prevention. So say there's something extremely stressful, like a dog staring your dog down in public, you can just pick your dog up and turn your back on whatever it is, and your body becomes the blocker so they don't see whatever it is. But if you have a dog that explodes as soon as you put your hands on your dog to pick them up, you can imagine that it's going to be very difficult, and you're going to have to just like, to get out of that situation, trot away or run away or get behind a car to create distance if you don't want your dog to overreact before they've been trained to see triggers as just something in the environment that it is not a big deal, that you're going to save them from it or even look to you for a treat. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about is leash pressure. So if your dog is on a leash in public, which is normal, and suddenly a loose dog runs over that comes around a corner and now is in your dog's face, the leash on your dog is loose, but this dog looks like it's going to make your dog react, then you want to move your dog away. And when your dog, if your dog has barrier, frustration, or aggression, and you pull on the leash, they then are going to bite the other dog that's in front of them. So that can be extremely inconvenient, but also extremely stressful for your dog and the other dog. So with all of this, you're going to be using management and prevention to prevent that you're not going to get into situations like this until your dog is prepared for them. But some things are carrying things or using your body to block to move your dog until they've been trained. But definitely with every single client, with every single dog I work on teaching the leash pressure, hitting the end of the leash or feeling pressure on the leash to create a conditioned emotional response of yay, and a behavior of where's my owner. So I work on that with all my dogs, and if I see over time there are certain things that they do pull towards, I'll use those as opportunities to work on the leash pressure game. So if you work on it enough, and I suggest doing at least 10 to 12 sessions with your new puppy or adult rescue dog, and if you have a dog with barrier, frustration, or aggression when they hit the end of the leash, I would work on it at least 20 times, over time, maybe every 3 days or so, until you're really seeing that conditioned response, and then keep doing brush up sessions. So basically, not only is this causing barrier frustration, but if your dog is also reactive or worried about things in the environment or aroused, say they want to play with another dog, and they're feeling frustrated that they can't get to them, it's trigger stacking. So they're feeling like they can't get to the other dog, but they're also feeling the pressure. And by working on counter conditioning and desensitizing the dog to feeling the pressure on their harness, you're going to greatly reduce the possibility that they're going to react, because you're removing one of the triggers that are being stacked together before they go over the top and stress out. So working on leash pressure, working on restraint, being picked up. Another example is a big dog being picked up is maybe you're trying to, I picked my border collie Wish up and put her on my shoulders when a mastiff broke out of its harness to come and try and attack her. And I had already worked on picking her up. So that incident actually, after I'd been through that incident, she actually became more relaxed around loose dogs than she was before, because she knew, oh, Emily's going to save me. So it's quite interesting when you start to condition the things you do to your dog where you're restraining them or picking them up. They're learning that you are taking control of the situation, which is just opinion-based because we don't really know what dogs are feeling. But what we can do is focus on changing their emotional response and changing their behavior to be reliable in these situations. So with the leash pressure game, you're breaking the steps up and the conditioning process into small approximations where the dog is successful and really having a reinforcing experience for it happening. So that is why I suggest that you get a trainer who can read your dog's body language and tell you whether your dog is having a positive emotional response, or maybe you're going too fast, too quickly, and you're just not going to have that success. And you can also ask them what type of reinforcement you should be using. So there's a whole bunch of things that a trainer can help you with. I'll link videos below on the leash pressure game, but here are some tips. It's extremely important to begin conditioning exercises somewhere where the dog is familiar with the environment, that it always looks the same, and they're familiar with the sounds. So when you are starting to add a stimulus that you're then going to reinforce so that the dog starts to have a positive emotional response to, their brain is going to be able to concentrate 100% on that. So they're feeling the leash pressure and it's predicting this wonderful reinforcement. If you try to do this out and about, say especially when your dog is like pulling towards another dog that it really doesn't like or it's scared of, you're not going to get that powerful conditioned emotional response. So really repeating it like exercise at home, that's really going to build that strong emotional response and stimulus response association, similar to a traffic light goes red or green and you just do it rather than think about it. So you work in a non-distracting environment and you use things that your dog has a positive emotional response to. So like a distraction of food, a distraction of toys, a distraction of a person they really like, and work on all of those. If the dog only likes you, have someone else work on the leash pressure game while you're standing further away from the dog that the dog trusts, like a family member. And then when you've worked on all these distractions and you can't ever get your dog to pull again, then you can start searching in the environment for things that make the dog excited. One example that can get dogs to pull is if you park in a parking lot and it's all tar and then there's some grass. Most dogs will not want to stay on tar. They find it disgusting, especially with all the cars parking there, and the smell probably terrible. So they're wanting to get to the cement. So then most dogs will pull. So you can use those moments to work on the leash pressure game. And if the dog comes and walks on a loose leash, you can then go and let them sniff a bush or something like that. You can also sprinkle treats in the grass and practice the leash pressure game away from treats in the grass, which is in my Leash Walking Connected course on my website that I'll link below too, because that is a great course for dogs with reactivity and leash frustration and leash aggression. The final tip is teaching your dog to back up. So if they're in a situation that they don't like, they can back away from it. Back away and turn away. And this was so helpful for my dog Wish. For example, if I had puppies in the house and say I put up an X-pen or I have someone else's dog over, I put up a baby gate, so I'm working with someone else's dog they've never met, and she goes up and wants to watch what's going on and her face is right against the barrier, and then suddenly the dog in the room wants to come near her face. Instead of just violently attacking the dog through the fence, she can back up and turn away. And by reinforcing that behavior, now reliably, if ever I have a dog behind a barrier, or we're walking around a dog park, or there's just a barrier and a dog behind it, she knows how far away she feels comfortable from the barrier. So if she was there to maybe sniff the fence that had pee on, and a dog comes running over, she knows to back up and just look the other way, and that's going to be the best solution in that scenario. She sometimes will even look up at me for a treat and say, hey, look how cool I am. So that's really awesome. To begin with, to train this behavior, most dogs it's going to be extremely hard to have two dogs against a barrier where their noses are like inches away from each other. So the solution, for example, when I got my little puppy, Bliss, I have a video of introducing dogs together, a new dog to the household, and in that video you'll see, and I'll link that below, is that he is in a pen that has another pen around it. So there's a bigger barrier between the pen and where Wish could come up and see him. So it was enough distance that neither would find it frustrating that they couldn't get to each other. Frustrating because the puppy wanted to say hi, and frustrating for Wish because she might want to tell the puppy to go away. So it depends on your dog at how far that barrier might be. It might be 10 feet. At first I used a double barrier so the dogs couldn't go face to face. For some dogs, the barriers might need to be on either end of the room at first, so the dogs are 10 or 20 feet away from each other. And you have to make sure that the dogs won't jump over. But they're far enough away that they can't, that they feel comfortable enough to relax. Now, in a situation where it's extreme, and you really want to be there where they're seeing each other 100% of the time to make it a reinforcing experience, because what can happen is that if the dogs are wandering loose and you're doing something else, they can be looking at each other and intimidating each other, even though they're not doing that extreme reaction. So you're actually making the problem worse rather than better. It's better to set up specific training sessions where they see the other dog through the barrier, they get reinforcement, or see the other dog, learn to turn away, get reinforcement, or back up and get reinforcement. And then you basically just make the barrier smaller and smaller until there's just one barrier that you're working with. And to make it easier as well is if you have someone else working with the other dog and you have their body turned away, so their butt is right against the barrier. So this dog is coming over and there's no face, there's just a butt, and they can smell the butt, find that reinforcing, and they're practicing a different behavior of, oh, nothing bad happened with the barrier, and turning away, and then having the dog sideways, and then having the dog working for treats and doing behaviors near the barrier while the other dog is right next to the barrier. So you're teaching the dog like nothing bad happens. And then once you've done all this, then you can start experimenting with the dog facing directly at each other. And when I begin this, if you're going to begin this, you then want to decrease some form of criteria. So I would make the double barrier again. So when the dogs are doing direct eye contact, you make the double barrier again, and hopefully, if you can, choose a dog that gives calming signals. One way to break up the steps to be small enough so that the conditioning and the training is optimal is to use a distraction that's not even a dog at first if the dog has leash, frustration, or aggression towards dogs. So I'll either hold the dog's leash if the dog is excited by me as a trainer, and then have the owner walk back and forth slowly and then run back and forth and do exciting movement before I then do exciting movement. If this is easy for the dog, we can quickly move on to higher level distractions such as toys or introducing an actual dog. It depends on the dog's personality as to which things will trigger the dog more, whether it be when the dog is in close proximity to them, how the dog is moving, or if the dog is still. So in this case, we used distance at first to make it easier for the dog and slower movement of the decoy dog.
You can also tell him how good he is. Like, you click and you tell him, good job. Good, that was awesome. Anytime he sees the dog and he chooses to look back at you, it's pretty cool. Good.
Well, here we go.
So you can click that. Instead of saying, here we go, you could click that millisecond, and then if he lunges like that, you just say, let's go, and go the other way. So let's go. Yay!
When you make a situation harder in one aspect for the dog, you can make it easier in another aspect. For this dog, me holding Tug made it much easier to be closer to him. Now, this might not be the case with other dogs, especially if they've had a history of getting excited with, say, the owner holding a cat or something like that. It's important to understand that in some cases, it might actually be easier for the dog to start with the trigger closer to them rather than further away. Say, for example, a dog that reacts to a skateboard or a car. If the car or the skateboard is right in front of them moving slowly, that's going to be easier for them than beginning with the skateboard or car at a distance moving slowly, especially for herding breeds. If your dog has barrier frustration and you're wanting to go to a seminar or take a class where your dog is required to be in a crate away from you, I would suggest not going to those classes until your dog is reliably comfortable with dogs passing and going and sniffing right into their crate before you ever attend, and then work on it in training sessions with friends, because people are not paying attention when they're somewhere like that. They might be talking and their dog is going to go right in and stare at your dog while they're trapped in a crate. So if a class would let you, you can put an X pen around the front of that crate to prevent people letting their dogs go in and sniff your dog's face while they're trapped in there. But to begin with, you can begin the process by having the dog in the crate with a large barrier, the double barrier, and working on dogs approaching and walking past, and then shrinking the barrier to where your dog is comfortable with dogs going back and forth and looking in, using dogs your dog likes first, if you have dogs that your dog likes that does that, that do that. Another idea, which I've done with clients, and this, you really have to have a stable, relaxed, and happy decoy dog, is that I've had my own dogs, Tug and my border collie who passed, were amazing at this, at ignoring dogs. You put them in a crate with a double barrier around, and then have the client's dog with the barrier frustration issue on a long line, and they can walk around seeing your dogs through the barrier, but they're stationary, relaxing on their dog bed, just chilling out, licking up the crumbs that they've gotten as treats from me. And I can be standing with my dogs telling them how good they are, and the client can be letting their dog approach the barrier and then do recalls away, or the leash pressure game away from the barrier, or teaching their dog to back up, or going in between the crate, the barrier, and blocking their dog to get them to move away, practice approaching from different angles, and getting their dog used to seeing another dog behind a barrier, but it's an extremely predictable situation, and then you can start to shrink it. A lot of people want to avoid situations where the dog is behind a barrier or on a tight leash because they know it's going to be too much for their dog, and their dog might become reactive or even aggressive. So they might start just going to dog parks or places with the dog off leash. But the problem with that is if the dog suddenly does feel trapped, that behavior can come back. So for example, like if dogs are meeting and at a dog park, and then suddenly there are too many dogs around your dog, they can feel trapped. Or if an owner goes to pet your dog while another dog's coming to say hi, they could feel trapped by that and suddenly aggress on the dog coming over. So I suggest it's extremely important to, even though your dog is having a wonderful time, there are those situations where it can go bad very quickly. So avoid those situations, and working on the barrier frustration behind a fence or on leash. If you can work on the issue to where your dog is reliable and not reacting in these situations where their behavior is magnified, imagine how reliable they're going to be off leash and social with other dogs if you worked on these issues first. So a lot of times clients will be reluctant to want to address them because they're so difficult. But once you've addressed them, you get this dog that is so amazingly reliable in stressful situations and in emergencies where, say, a dog is trying to attack them and they're cool as a cucumber because you've done all this training. So I really, really suggest that even with dogs that don't have these issues, working on the leash pressure game, the restraint, being picked up if they're a small dog, and teaching them to back away, and doing training setups with other dogs and people is going to greatly reduce the undue stress in their life and the undue stress in your life. I also wanted to mention that Michael Shikashio's recent podcast on the bitey end of the dog is on barrier, frustration, and aggression. So you can check that out in the link below if you're a dog trainer or someone struggling with this issue. It's really important to listen to that because there's a wealth of information. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can leave them as a comment. See you later.